All right, so I got a lot of great questions from in the comment section of my last video, so I'm going to jump right into them. So Christopher asks, how often do you paint plein air versus in the studio? I would say that most of the time I paint plein air. If I had to like split it into percentages, probably 80% plein air, 20% in the studio. I used to be kind of the other way. I'd be like 80% in the studio. But since I've started making these videos, I paint outside a lot more often. And I try to get out like 3 or 4 times a week, and then maybe, have one day in the studio. Most of the time, the work that I do in the studio is touch-ups. I'll just kind of take the paintings that I've done in the field and then pick my favorite ones, or the ones that I think will be the easiest to finish off. And I'll just kind of clean them up, do the minimal amount of work to clean them up and get them ready to frame and send off to a show. So yeah, but I find now that I really prefer painting outdoors as much as possible. The bigger work I do, like I tend to do mostly up to, I'd say I've done like 24 by 30s on location, which can be challenging when the wind is blowing. So typically stuff in that range, 25 by 30 or 24 by 30 up to whatever is done in the studio. So for my show at Studio Gallery, typically I'll have a couple of 3 foot by 3 foot paintings. I had a 3 foot by 5 painting. Those are definitely done in the studio for now. So that's the scoop on that. Let's see, Kathleen asks, how do you keep your light colors light when applying over darker paint? So typically what I do is I try to avoid putting the light paint over the darker paint. Because what'll happen is if you've got some dark paint on the canvas and then you try to put light over that, unless that lower level of paint is dry, then it's going to mix together. And I like to paint alla prima, which is, I believe it means like alla prima first. It's like all at once, basically, like wet on wet painting. That's the style of painting I do, where I'll just paint, do a painting all in one session. So in that case, the paint is going to be wet the whole time, because that's the nature of oil paint. Even if I use a fast drying medium, those first layers of paint are going to be wet. So typically what I'll do, if you've watched some of the, the demos I've done or the process videos I've filmed, what I do is I will leave the areas that are going to be light. I leave them blank. I do not put a darker color down. Now, because it's really hard to cover. It's impossible. If you've got a dark color down, unless it's super thin and it's dried to the point where it's tacky a little bit. Sometimes you can get that. If you're using like a fast drying medium and it's warm outside, sometimes that first layer, if it's really thin, it'll be tacky enough that you can apply some light colored paint over it without mixing the two and getting a muddy result. But basically what I try to do is I try to apply my light colors over clean panel, unpainted panel. Now there's one other thing I will say about that. There's a landscape painter named Ray Roberts. He does a lot of seascapes. He's a California painter. And I was watching a video that he did, and he talks about actually painting in his lights, like when he's doing the ocean and there's white water, he'll paint that in first, so that it doesn't get, so that he makes sure that it's nice and bright and the paint is nice and clean. Because it doesn't take much, if you get some dark color mixing into your white, it doesn't take much to really dull it down or muddy it up. The other thing you can do too is wait till the painting dries and come back in and punch up those light areas later. So that's something that I'll do when I'm out plein air if I can't get the lights to really pop, just because my brush is dirty or whatever. Oftentimes I will come back in the studio and I'll sort of punch up the lights a little bit. All right, Angela asks, did you make your own viewfinders? Yes, I did, and I just basically, what I did was I took a piece. The viewfinders are, and I don't have one right here. Bad production values, but you've seen my videos, you know how there's like a square of cardboard with a rectangle cut in it, and then I hold it up and it kind of helps me frame the scene, isolate the scene so I can see the composition. And there are like products you can buy on the market, like something like the View Catcher, which I think is about $8 from, you know, Jerry's, or Blick might have them as well. I have one of those, but I kind of like having my own that are a little bit bigger, where the opening is a little bigger. The View Catcher has kind of a tiny, it's a little bit, it's like maybe an inch or an inch and a half wide. I have some that are like 2 or 3 inches wide, the opening of my viewfinder. And basically what I did was I just took a thick piece of cardboard, and then I just like measured out, like say it was, I don't know, I'd measure out different ratios, like one for 8x10s and one for like 12x16s, you know. So a 12x16 would be a 3x4 ratio. And I just made my own out of cardboard, and then I spray painted them black so that when I held it up, that it would, you know, you're not getting, it makes the scene stand out more when your View Catcher or your viewfinder is black. So yeah, they're not that hard to make. And I just used like a razor, you know, like a straight edge razor, a box cutter to cut out the square. So yeah, so I have some of I have both. I have store-bought and I have my own. I actually do use my own more often, to be honest. So for what that's worth. Veronica asks, how do you finish the sides of the panel? Do you paint them black? So when I'm painting on my typical panels, which are made out of, I believe it is 1/8 inch Masonite whiteboard or whatever that I gesso myself, and then I frame them in floater frames. So the sides are somewhat visible sometimes, but being that it's only an 1/8 inch, there is paint on the edges. I never clean those up. It doesn't really affect the final appearance. The final appearance still looks really clean. Also too, the panel is recessed into the frame in such a way that you never actually see the side of the panel. But when I do paint on canvas, which I occasionally will do, especially for the larger paintings, then I will paint the edges black, because the inside of my floater frame is black as well. So it creates this nice dark sort of, you know, perimeter around the painting itself. And she asked if I sometimes would paint, you know, like continue the painting around the edge. I have done that when I'm not going to frame a painting, like say on a large gallery wrap painting where the edges are like say 1.5 inches. In a case like that, I would often paint the image all the way around the edge. I'm not crazy about that look, because that's also how giclées are done. Like if you get a print on canvas of a painting, typically they'll gallery wrap it. And so to me, I just like a framed painting. I like, even the floater frames are very, I don't know, it's just like a very subtle way, but elegant way to finish off a painting, I think. And so that's all I do now. I frame everything in natural wood floater frames. Occasionally I will stain one a dark color like black, but very rarely. All right, Crafty Mip asks, how do you recommend improving technical skill and developing a style? Do you recommend courses or practicing from photos at home? First thing I'll say about style is style just emerges naturally from painting a lot. So the longer you paint, the more you're going to sort of develop your style, and kind of once you get your process figured out. I found that like recently, like my style hasn't evolved that much. I mean, it is maybe there maybe in the beginning there was this, you know, as there was a lot of learning going on, I think there was a lot of evolution early on. But then as you kind of figure out what it is you like and what you're after, those changes become, it's more just refinements on what you're doing, and it's maybe something that, you know, I would notice that you guys wouldn't notice. So just by painting a lot, you're going to find your own vision, your own style. And then I would say, you know, it's obviously to improve your technical skill, paint as much as possible. There's another thing that I think is really important. Your technical skill development is, a lot of it is perception. It's up in your head. So you want to look at as many paintings as possible. You know, that's really important. So that's one thing to focus on, is like make an album, drag and drop pictures off of the internet, make an album of paintings that you like, and then really carefully look at them, you know, in a technical way, you know, zoom in on them, see how the brushwork was applied, carefully study work and try to reverse engineer things that you like. In other words, look at it and then try to duplicate those things. And that's, I think, a really helpful way to improve your technical skill. You've got to be engaged. You've got to be aggressive about figuring things out for yourself. Courses, I think, can be helpful. I found for myself, they really weren't. You know, like if you go paint with somebody, they figured out their style and their thing. That's why I try to keep things on this channel very general. In other words, like, you know, the last video I put out about my process. These are things, you know, I try to keep it general, and then you've got to take what you see here or elsewhere, the basic, you know, fundamentals, and then you've got to go out and figure it out for yourself. You've got to go out and build on those things. There are certain things that are, again, like things about value and things about mixing color and all that, that are, you know, just basic things that you should know. But then it's up to you to take that knowledge and develop something that's all your own. So again, look at a lot of paintings, study them carefully, try to reproduce effects that you like, and then just paint as much as possible. Keep going. Your style will develop on its own, and your technical skill will improve. So that's it. Just keep going. All right. Wow. This might have to be broken into 2 different videos. We'll see. All right. Let's see. Jamie asked, what colors do you mix for the illuminated top of a backlit wave? So yeah, so in the late afternoon here on the West Coast, the sun is, you know, is going to be behind the waves. So when you've got that situation, the wave kind of peaks up, the sun is shining through the back, and it illuminates, especially the top of the wave, which is really thin. So you'll get sort of this aqua blue, and obviously depending on the lighting conditions of the day, I've seen it from it could be like something like a minty blue to more of a tropical aqua blue. I've seen lots of colors in the tops of waves like that. I usually will end up mixing those colors with some sort of phthalo blue. I actually had a question on Patreon about phthalo blue because some people are confused about it because there's so many different phthalo blues out there. Like Utrecht calls theirs phthalo blue, and then in parentheses it says green shade. Winsor & Newton calls theirs just phthalo blue. Both of those paints are made with the pigment PB15, okay? That's pigment blue 15, I believe, so PB15. They have different names, but it's the exact same color. Somebody else like Grumbacher, I think they call theirs phthalo blue, but it's a different spelling. They leave off the PH in front of it. But they're using a variant of PB15 that has a slight red tint to it. I've used theirs as well, and it's fine. It looks good too. It's just maybe doesn't have that super strong aqua punch that maybe the pure PB15. But anyway, I think any phthalo blue will work for that. So, and then my friend Araya, he uses for the tops of the waves, I notice he'll use cobalt teal. There's a lot of painters that love that color, cobalt teal. I've never used it, but I may add that at some point because it's a very high value, very light colored aqua. That's impossible to mix with even something as strongly tinted as a phthalo. Phthalo, I've experimented with phthalo green too, but I don't find that color seems a little bit obnoxious to me. I mean, I think phthalo blue is actually not that obnoxious. It is super strong tinting and it's hard to control it at times, but it's not, I think it's a beautiful color when you mix it with white and you add a little yellow. I mean, it makes these beautiful aquas and blue greens. So phthalo blue is the way to go. I mean, I think there are uses for phthalo green, but I don't really use it very often. So phthalo blue, and I don't think it matters which one and what they call it. Experiment and see what you like. Okay, let's see here. Piper asks, how do you seal or protect the finished painting? How long does it take for that finish to dry? What I did for many years was I would use Damar Retouch Varnish, which was in a spray can. Basically with oil paintings, you've got to let them dry typically about 3 months here in California if it's warm and you know, warm and dry like season. It takes a little longer in the winter time for paintings to dry, but you want to make sure that that paint is completely dry before you apply a traditional varnish, like a Damar based traditional varnish. I don't ever do that. Most of my paintings are out the door pretty much. You know, when I finish them up and varnish them, it's usually because they're going to a show or they're sold or whatever, and I'm going to be mailing them off. So what I end up doing is applying retouch varnish in a spray can. And what that does is that protects the painting, and you can use it as soon as the painting is dry enough to touch. So that's what I did for many years. The idea behind retouch varnish is it makes the painting look wet. So if you want to go back and work on the painting, you can paint over the retouch varnish. So, you know, imagine you've done a painting and you want to do touch-ups, but it's like there's certain areas that are flat and some areas are shiny, and then you spray over it with the retouch varnish, and then it makes the whole thing look wet. So it's easier to match colors if you want to paint on that painting again. I've never done that. I've never like used it for that purpose. Most of the time I'll just do touch-ups, even if it's, you know, even if the paint is flat and shiny or whatever. For the type of painting I do, it's not really that important. I would imagine maybe if you're doing like portraits or something where it's really, you know, the differences in values are very close, and I don't know, but my painting, as you guys know, is pretty loose and seat of the pants. So anyway, but I used to use that, and that works fine. But lately somebody turned me on to Gamvar, which is a varnish from Gamblin, and you can use that when the painting is dry to the touch. The only difference is I don't think you can paint over that. I'm not sure, but it doesn't sound like it's suggested. So if you want to rework the painting or repaint it, I think you've got to remove it with alcohol or whatever. But look at Gamvar, because I've been using that now. It's really quick and easy to apply, and I've been really happy with it. So Gamvar, not sponsored. Okay, let's see here. Alec asks, do you keep brushes for specific values, or do you keep cleaning the same brush? I do not have different brushes I'm like a one brush painter until that brush isn't working anymore, and then I set it down and I look for whatever. I do tend to clean my brush. That's why I have my brush washer on my palette. I'm not a slow and methodical painter. I just my personality is just more, you know, I don't know, I just kind of more go for it. I'm trying to slow down though and think in terms of, like, say for composition, like, in other words, kind of, you know, spend time really thinking things through. But then once I pick up the brush and I go, it's like I have a solid idea or a clear idea of what I'm after. And the painting process itself is still the same. It's fast. It's, I like that process. I like getting lost in that. So I can't be, one brush is all I can handle. So until, like I say, until that brush is either too big or too small or whatever, and then I pick up another brush to do whatever it is I've got to do. So I would say, yeah, I don't do that. It could be a good thing to do, and if that works for you. So the idea is, in other words, you'd have like one brush for darks, or a set of brushes for your darks and a set of brushes for your lights. And then that way you don't have to like wash the brush. So say you're using a light colored brush, you might just, like, you know, squeeze out the paint and then mix up another light color and whatever, and then go from there. I tend to just keep washing brushes. That's what the same brush over and over. So if I'm shifting from dark to light, I'll just wash it out and then I'll go to light. But hey, it can be a good thing to do. Plenty of painters do that. Everybody's got their own methods, so whatever works for you. I'd say just follow your instincts on that one. Okay, I think final question here. Yeah, final question. Bailey asks, any tips for acrylics? Any way to make them thicker? I have a friend, Ryan, who lives out in the valley, and we one day, I was down there for Kern County Plein Air Festival, and one day we went out and painted together, and he paints an acrylic, and I was kind of like, we were kind of walking through, or I was kind of showing him my process, but with acrylics. And it was really interesting because I'd never painted with them before. But basically the same compositional, obviously compositional and color ideas, all of that stuff is the same, whether you're working from, you know, working with oil paint or you're working with acrylic paint. The big difference is that the acrylic will dry quickly, really quickly, especially outside, especially like when it was 90 degrees and super arid. That's the biggest challenge outdoors, I think, especially in the summertime, is just keeping the paint from drying too quickly. So I think there's some really nice advantages. I mean, it's amazing to be able to go over a color almost immediately with a different color and not have them blend together. However, if you want blending to happen, which is one of the nice things about oil paints, then that becomes difficult with acrylic. There are things you can put into the acrylic paint to slow down the drying process. the other part of the question about making it thicker, there are things that you can add, certain mediums that you can add that you mix with the paint to make it thicker as well. I'm not like an expert on acrylic paint, but I have seen some painting. There's a couple, like I really like Charles Mavali's paintings. They look like oil paintings. Marsha Burt's another one. She's in Santa Barbara. Beautiful paintings that are done with acrylic that look like oil paintings. So I don't know a lot about it, but I would take a look at acrylic painters you like and see the effects they're getting, and kind of, you know, it can be very inspirational, and you may learn a thing or two from looking at their work. All right, I do have a bunch of questions regarding Liquin, which is the medium that I use when I'm painting outdoors. I'm gonna actually make a separate video about that because there's a ton of questions about it. And so that'll be coming up probably in a day or two. And I'll just answer all those questions about Liquin and explain how I use it and my thoughts about it. So anyway, I hope you guys are all safe and healthy out there, and working on some sort of little creative project. If you got more questions, put them in the comments down below. I'm on like day 8 of seeing no other human beings, and I'm still going strong. I live alone here, so yeah, so hope you guys are doing well. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for hanging out. I'll see you guys in the next video.